Along with the ASUS ROG Strix X870EE motherboard, I spent the last few weeks fiddling around with a full ASUS build with some other cool components that I wanted to cover. I've already reviewed the motherboard, so if you're looking for that content, I will leave a link in the description down below. However, this video is a little bit of a detailed build process of the PC I used during the review, so I'm going to cover each component in a little bit so you can check them out. ASUS sent over a few components for me to use, including the ROG Strix 1000W Platinum power supply, ROG Ryujin 3 Extreme cooler, an ASUS TUF RX 9070 XT GPU, the ASUS ROG Strix X870EE motherboard, the ROG Hercule X GPU support bracket, and it is all installed into the ROG Strix Helios 2 case. I also installed 32GB of DDR5 6000 MTS RAM into the board and put in a 2TB SSD. I also powered the board with an AMD Ryzen 9950X CPU. Basically, the PC was fully kitted out and it made for a pretty robust 4K gaming rig. But if you're wondering how the build process went about and if there were any challenges that I had, this is the video you want to watch. Starting off, the ROG Strix Helios 2 case is of course the biggest and most likely most important part of this build. This is not my first time using a Helios 2 case actually. In fact, I think I have built about 4 PCs in the past using this exact case, so if you ask me, I'm pretty much bored to death by the Helios 2 case already. I must also say that I'm not the biggest fan of the Helios 2 case in general. With so many case brands on the market, there are way better chassis out there that also don't cost as much as this case. They also look a lot better and have a lot more versatility and build variety to them. If you ask me, the Helios 2 case just kind of plays it safe, and it is an oversized, big, bulky and heavy case that pretty much doesn't do much when it comes to customization. But I guess the case is great for those looking for an overweight and bulky black PC. I didn't have any issues installing any components into the case, so I've got no problems with the actual approach of the PC. The cable management on the right panel includes some thick cable ducts to run all your cables through, and the plastic flap sections keep it all neat and tidy. There isn't much RGB on this case, in fact there isn't any RGB at all, but it does come with 4 pre-installed fans, so you can always swap those out with RGB ones if you want. There are some handy features in the case which I did enjoy using. The toolless side panels make it easy to remove the tempered glass sides. There's also a graphics card slot clamp that keeps everything neat and secure. In terms of modules, both the front and the top fan racks can be removed for easy radiator installation. I removed the top rack to install the Ryujin 3 Extreme cooler. It then easily goes back into the case and is screwed into the top with 2 screws. As mentioned, the cable management is pretty hassle-free and neat on this Helios 2 case, but I also have to thank the Strix 1000W power supply for this. This is actually my first time using the new cable materials on this unit, and I absolutely loved wiring this PC thanks to this power supply. The cables on the Strix ROG PSU are long and bendable. I want to call them spaghetti cables because they sort of remind me of the feeling that you get when fiddling with spaghetti. They don't tangle, every cable is braided, and the sheer looseness of the wiring means cables just maneuver around the case and can be easily tied together. While the cables are much longer than your traditional power supply cables, they definitely make wiring and running them pure bliss. It was also so great to just bundle up all the extra cables and slap a cable tie around them. Even then, they still kind of look neat. Usually I would try hide these away, but for some reason these braided cables look so much better than plastic cables and you don't mind showing some of them off. But generally, building this PC was quite straightforward. I don't know if that's maybe because I've built 5 full PCs this year, or perhaps the parts that I used were just more accessible. The motherboard installed into the Helios 2 just fine. I then took the Ryujin 3 cooler and mounted the fans onto the bracket. I removed the CPU clamps, installed the ASUS ones included in the cooler box, and screwed the cooler onto the board. The pump spring loader screws also made this easily one of the most seamless installations I've had. Running cables across the case was also a breeze. These cables just went into all the available slots and looked neat enough. Granted, it isn't the most cable-free view, but I don't think it's possible in this case. For example, the USB headers are quite bulky and they do stick out and there's just no way to hide them away. The motherboard itself was much the same too. I have covered this in a full video, but essentially I had just had to install the CPU, install the SSD by removing one heatsink from the board, placed in the DDR5 RAM, and it was good to go. The case headers were also all bundled into one cable, so it was also quite easy to install. The case comes with multiple dust filters too, including a front, bottom, and top filter. Speaking of the top, the case also comes with those thick fabric straps that are used as carry handles to pick up and move the case around. Given that this case weighs 18 kilograms without anything inside, you'll probably need these to pick this up. They can be also removed during installation, although when I put it back it just didn't look the same as when I took them off. I just can't remember how I removed them. In terms of the fan headers and hubs, the case does have its own PWM fan header with 6 ARGB slots and fan connectors. However, with the components that I had, I didn't even have to look at this hub. That's because out of the box, the header is already wired to the bundled cables alongside the front header, for example. So you can use this included fan hub to extend your fans and install new fans if you have to. But the case didn't need any additional fiddling because everything was just wired to that hub already, which actually made installation so much easier. This means I just had to connect the radiator fans and the pump to their own headers on the board to make this all work. Of course, the case's fan hub did have to go into its own header too, but it wasn't difficult to get going. ASUS also sent over a GPU, which did stick out like a sore toe among all the ROG Strix components here because it was the only tough component that I had. Thankfully, the brand did send over a cool GPU mount to make it all look a bit better, so that you kind of distracted by the GPU mount and the tough logo kind of blurs into the background. The mount is called the ROG Herculex. It is quite an old mount, but it's the first time I actually used one. It is designed to fit under the GPU and gets connected to one of your motherboard's ARGB headers. Once connected, the mount lights up and is fully customizable using the Armory crate. I won't say that I hated this mount at all. I think the mount is pretty cool to look at, and the glass-like glowing finish is also pretty cool to have in your case. In this specific build, the mount didn't need any adjusting at all. If anything, I think it was a little bit too high out of the box, and I kind of think that the GPU was bending a bit. I couldn't lower it down further than it was, so keep that in mind. The mount goes from between 2.7 centimeters and 12.8 centimeters out of the box. It can be lifted up using the side screws and quickly lowered using a release button on the bottom of the shaft. ASUS has also included a magnetic leveling tool in the box, which fits neatly under the mount. Overall, I did have a good time with this PC and getting it set up and going. I did hit a speed bump, but that was only when it came to installing the software and drivers after Windows was installed. ASUS's driver and software program runs at a snail's pace, and it sits for hours and installs Realtek audio drivers and other drivers which just take way too long for a modern day PC. I often wondered if my internet dropped because some of the installations just sat at 50% for at least 30 minutes before going anywhere. But I did enjoy my time with this PC. I did benchmark the motherboard and did a full review of the component. But generally speaking, the ventilation on this case is excellent. But for more cooling stats and numbers, be sure to check out the review of that motherboard. But those are my thoughts on this entire build. Huge thanks to ASUS for sending these components for me to test out. I'm looking forward to not having it around anymore so I don't have to break my back picking up this PC. While you're here, be sure to also check out my other videos up on the channel and subscribe for future content like this. Until next time, farewell.